Hey guys, just reached 50 subscribers on this channel. I just want to thank you, whether you like how we use Christian metaphysics to model numbers, whether you like how I break down the concept of the cognitive theoretical model of the universe, or how I illustrate these concepts, whether you like how I think about scriptures. Thank you for watching, and it's a pleasure to release that content and to think about it with you guys. Um, as far as the origin of this channel, which is the model of numbers as the Trinity, 0, 1, and plus infinity, I just want to share a few thoughts on why I think it is a model that is significant. And so I just want to break down a few high-level concepts on it. So numbers as 0, 1, plus infinity. We model numbers as space-time and theology. Why is that? And space, you can think of space as the Immanuel Kant. When you think about the origin of numbers or geometry, thinks there's an a priori space that is so clear in your mind that you can picture a triangle and say, every time the triangle has the same angles, it has the same length. And so this is a space where this is so compelling that you can think that it's a source of geometry, of Euclidean geometry. And that sort of structure is what presents numbers as space, as just an extension extracted from that infinite space that just provides you extension, provides you some place to just join it, extension and extract information about them. And that's how numbers come out as space. It's just this additive aspect of numbers where you extract it from an infinite imaginary space in your mind, and you just extract something from that and you say that's numbers is just space. And then there's numbers as time, and numbers as time is just, you can structure numbers as space, but what's weird is that when you have 1 and 2, now you can say 2 is actually 1, and so 1 becomes 1/2. There's sort of a relativism of the structure of numbers as space, depending on how you define the unit. And it speaks to the fact that numbers are defined as a transformation of a first unit, right? And this unit, when you transform the unit in space, it's more like a grammatical transformation of the unit. And so it refers more to the concept of time, where space is like static syntax, where just all the extensions together, and time is more like you transform one extension into another. You transform the unit into whatever number. It can be 2, it can be pi, it can be any number. And so that's the second aspect. And when you think about it, to think of numbers in a line, you need to think about them as if there were a specific state, instead of a structure that gives you a syntax to say that's the state of my number right now. That's 2, that's 1. 1 is like half 2. It's a little bit short. It's exactly half of 2. So you need to think of it as a syntax, a static syntax, and also as a transformative syntax of the unit. Because if you ignore that, you can just say, okay, now the number you define at 2, I define it as 1, and so it changes all the ratios. And the most there's a way where you can think of number only as this multiplicative aspect of going from 1 to any other number, just as a transformation of the unit. And if you think about the transformation of the unit, you start to think of numbers multiplicatively. That's why numbers are both time and space. It's so space-time. That's where you arrive at this concept of space-time, which is a logical concept that you apply to numbers to think about the line. And then finally, there's theology, and for that, mathematicians used to say, like Kronecker used to say, anyway, he didn't say it in English, right? So it's all, you can have different translation, but natural numbers were created by God. Everything else is the work of man, And it speaks to the fact that it's very easy to think of numbers as counting. You have a unit and you just count how many units of that you have. And all the rest seems very arbitrary. Like, why do you start dividing the unit? Why do you have the rational numbers? Why do you have the irrational numbers? Why do you have these limits, these delicate cuts, And I think the way to solve that is through that concept that I introduced of theology, where now you have the signs, you have plus is good, and minus is sort of evil, and you have these things that are interacting multiplicatively, but also you have this constant of plus infinity. You actually model plus infinity as something that is defining the numbers, and this plus infinity is the infinite good, and you define it by, you sum the extensions, and when they sort of diverge, you say that's a sign that the sum is this infinite extension, and this infinite extension is the only transcendent extension. And so all the sums that are not diverging, now they point to a number. And so now, because you define 0, 1, and plus infinity, which are very clear, important constant, now you have what's infinity about. And infinity is about defining this continuity. And so now you don't think of numbers just as counting. You actually think of them in a line where you have 0, you have 1, and then you have plus infinity at the end of the line. And now you don't, it's not natural to say just, well, natural numbers are the only thing that makes sense. The rest is sort of arbitrary because we just add random conditions. No, now there's this plus infinity, which is very specifically structured. And so the real number line is not an arbitrary condition. Now, with this 0, 1 plus infinity, it becomes natural to talk about real numbers. And, Aristotle used to say, like, the world of Earth, it's just lines, and then you have a circle, which is the world of heaven. You have the circles, different circles of heavens. And a circle is such a basic thing. And circle, the perimeter is actually pi. So as soon as you talk about circle, which is one of the most basic thing, you start to talk about these irrational numbers. And if you just structure numbers with 0, 1, and then you add this seemingly complex condition on top of it, you always get the impression that it's all made up. But when you have 0, 1 plus infinity, it's actually something that's tying together to the real numbers. And so where pi starts to become something that is supernatural to think about in the basic way you think about numbers. So you have your space-time and you have theology, which puts this constant in plus infinity, and you can think about it very concrete way. You can contract the plane to actually see plus infinity, on P over 2 if you just contract it with the reciprocal of tangent, for example. But now you actually have the constant that makes it natural to think about real numbers, and to think about circles, about pi, the area of circles. Otherwise, there's several different ways to define continuity, which none of them seem to be analytic from the concept. The concept of number, you think analytically of it. You think, well, it's really about unit, and you're just counting stuff, right? And then all the rest is sort of made up. But now, if you define the numbers with 0, 1 plus infinity, real numbers become analytic. So it's proper to the concept of numbers itself, because now you have actually this thing at the end of the line that defines itself very powerfully as something that will define all the irrational numbers. And so that's why I think it's an actual important concept. That's why space-time is just, you can think of it as the static syntax in space, and then the dynamic grammatical transformative rule of the unit that goes there. That's why it's called space-time. It's not just ways to talk about intuition. It's actually tied to a logical way to think about space or to navigate this concept. And then you have the 0, 1 plus infinity, which also, when you interpret them, there's powerful ingredients in there. 0, it's the boundary between good and evil, minus and plus, and so it ties about the existence of evil in the world. Then you have the 1, which is the quantum of light, which you can think this is the unit of telesis, actual light, or you can think of it as this is Jesus Christ, which is the orientation of light, the unit of good. And then you have all of these two things that are also identifying with the infinite good, which is something that is not part of the numbers. And so this infinite good is transcendent, and so it also grounds good and evil with different levels, where the infinite good is reached from the point of view of the Trinity 0, 1 plus infinity, but it's not from the perspective, the local perspective. So that grounds the local perspective and the God perspective, also like almost the primary teller and the secondary teller perspective of good and evil, whereas the primary teller has access to this plus infinity, as it's identified like this, and the secondary teller is more at the level where infinity is never reached, because it's like a series of numbers that goes to infinity, but it's never equal to it. It doesn't belong to the number. And so you have this stratification of how you interpret numbers, where you have this actually achieved infinity, which is also nice for when you have these equations, when you divide by 0, like the inverse of 0. This is not defined from our point of view, but you can define it from the point of view of the primary teller, where actually 1 equals 0 times plus infinity, which makes it much nicer. Right? Numbers shouldn't be clunky. Numbers are defining, it's a language that is used to define how things evolve in the world. It's a very serious thing. It shouldn't be clunky. It shouldn't be like arbitrary definition. Just God created natural numbers, and then we're just making stuff up, like Kronecker used to say. No, it has to be well made. It has to be natural. It has to be an analytic concept, which is what you have when you have this 0, 1 plus infinity. Real numbers become almost an analytic concept of our intuition, and it has to be also. And numbers shouldn't be clunky in the fact that, you have these two operation, plus and multiplication, but really multiplication is not defined on 0, because why not? And then it's undefined, and then it's much better if you define a level, which is the primary teller level, where you have the Trinity, and now it's defined, and now there's actually an inverse of 0, which is plus infinity, which is, the achieved good, or the attracting good. And so that's why I think 0, 1 plus infinity, which is sort of the inception of this channel, is important. So I want to just, as we explore those other stuff, I just want to remind of this thing, which is, I'm not developing too much, but I think it was a great way to think about real numbers, and to think about the relation to the line, and to also ground them in many understanding that echo the components of the cognitive theoretic model of the universe, which is the theory of reality, of how everything is actually structured. And there you go. Thank you for supporting this channel, and I will see you guys in another video.